Joins me on my left, and Senator Hassan Omar, who's also the Wiper Secretary General, joins me on my right to discuss President Uhuru Kenyatta's latest, perhaps controversial statement saying that no Kenyan will return to the ICC. Let's listen to what the President had to say and then we'll talk.
Wale wakuja kunitafuta tena wajue ya kwamba sisi hatuko huko haturudi, huko haturudi. Your chapter tumefunga, he said.
That statement, Duale, has been taken to mean that we have effectively severed ties with the ICC. Is that the correct interpretation, that the government of Kenya will no longer cooperate with the ICC?
Number one, I think the procedure of disengaging from ICC, it's not that easy. I mean, the process is long. I mean, a bill must come to Parliament to repeal the International Crimes Act. But I think what the President meant in that small statement is that, one, what took us to the ICC was the post-election violence. So we will not go back to that route. I mean, no other time will Kenya, under his leadership, will Kenyans fight, shed blood over political competition. Two, and that we will not allow any Kenyan to be taken to the ICC, and if that scenario happens, then we have a more reformed judiciary. And of course, finally, the matter of the ICC withdrawal, for us now, there's a bill before Parliament, and I'm sure it's a private member's bill. If it comes to the floor of the House, we will take a position as a Jubilee coalition. And then finally, we are consulting with our friends in the African Union. I mean, the ICC question was taken to a different stage. The African Union had a position. They have formed an executive council of ministers. And until and unless we consult as a country, our colleagues in the African Union, then a position will be taken. But I'm sure the reading of the President is that we went to the ICC because of the post-election violence. And now that he is the President, he will not allow that kind of a scenario to play again. And that's a fair point, but what if there are avenues for appeal in both cases? I mean, they have not been dismissed without prejudice of them, being brought back to the ICC. So are you in effect saying that should there be a favorable appeal for the prosecutor, Kenya, the Deputy President, the President, or any other accused person will not be going back? Unless those who are both locally and internationally, who are part and parcel of the ICC case, will go and appeal themselves. I think the prosecutor has been very categorical in both cases that she is not going to appeal. So we don't anticipate any appeal from the prosecutor or from the court. So should the court of appeal in the Walter Baraza case, the extradition case, then determine that he should in fact be extradited, Kenya will not be cooperating? Walter Baraza and all the other three Kenyans must first go through the due process of the Kenyan law. And it's only after that, if the extradition orders are offered, then they will go. But I don't think for now Walter Baraza and his two other colleagues must go through the due process of the Kenyan judicial system. Hassan, what is the opposition's interpretation of this?
I will start from where you left in the last item with respect to Karim Khan. An extremely brilliant lawyer. You must give it up when you see a good professional. You see, immediately after the chambers, I granted the application of no case to answer. A day later, Fatou Bensouda came fighting, guns blazing, that she needs the three Kenyans implicated in witness tampering. The three Kenyans remain Bensouda's last link to the revival of the Kenyan cases. Why do I say that? So why I give credit to Karim Khan, he was able to hack, in my assessment or in our assessment, Bensouda's legal strategy, which is twofold. First, to protect the integrity of the court, because the court's integrity has been severely battered based on the politicization of these matters, and then finally saying that there was no evidence to sustain a charge. Secondly, is the legal strategy in terms of the fact that if you get these 3 Kenyans, and these ones will be in custody, a warrant of arrest, they are not going to be coming up and down the Hague. They will be in custody. Once you get these 3 people, you're able to take them through the process of the chambers. And then it is found that they did tamper with evidence, or they did tamper with the witness. Then for that now becomes the basis for Bensouda to say these retractions were based on certain incentives or coercions. And therefore, she may lodge a further application to the court to say that now offer summons to the witnesses who recanted the evidence to come here and present that evidence in chief, because we've already established in another case that those that evidence was retracted out of certain incentives which amounts to obstruction of justice. So I think for Bensouda, these 3 Kenyans remain in court, her last witnesses. And
so Kenya, you think, must still cooperate despite the president's statement?
So that for the president was preemptive. Because if these Kenyans were handed back to the ICC and gone through the processes and they were found to have been culpable of obstruction of justice, then Kenya will have to fulfill certain obligations, including probably these cases coming back in terms of revival. But whether we commence the process of withdrawal from ICC, it will not in any way whatsoever affect the existing cases that are presently before the case Kenya 1 or Kenya 2.
But it does affect cooperation to the extent that the prosecutor has already been saying, you know, the Kenyan government, through specifically the Attorney General's office, has not been handing over various documents. They could actually refuse to get on a plane and show up.
But you see, the existing, in fact, if you look at the statute or the RM statute of the ICC, it is very categorical that any withdrawal will not affect existing obligations or matters already before the courts. So therefore, Kenya will be under obligation to meet some of the demands or some of the requests or the applications lodged even in our local courts for transfer of these 3 Kenyans.
Okay.
So I think it will not affect in any substantial way. It is more of a political statement, but it is not necessarily, it does not have a legal consequence. So there will be various pressure. You saw Senator Orengo talking about the fact that then there will be concerted effort, like what we see with respect to al-Bashir. That every time there's pressure on Kenya, pressure on whatever country that Bashir visits, or South Africa, hand him over. There will be applications, and therefore it will put Kenya in a spotlight that is really not desirable in terms of its international relations and its commitment to international justice.
Well, what has been surprising, Duale, is that a lot of Kenyans expected that once these cases would be done, there would be no need necessarily for Kenya again to go ahead and withdraw. After all, your immediate object would have been met, that quote-unquote your 2 leaders are off the hook. Why is it still important to lobby other African governments to say we need to leave this court if certain reforms are not made? Why still make these threats?
I mean, Kenya is not about only the 2 leaders. Kenya is about the 14 million Kenyans. Kenya is about the future. It's about you make laws for posterity. I mean, 20 years, 50 years down the line, I mean, there will be Kenyans who might be unfairly again been tried by the ICC. So we're not only talking about Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto, or the 4 other cases. But,
and the converse is true, that there may be a dictator 10 years, 15 years down the line who needs to stand trial at an international
I think under the new constitution, under the new progressive constitution, it's not visible for a dictator to come to power in Kenya unless there is a military coup where the constitution is completely abrogated. But let me come back to the issue of the Kenyans 3 who are being accused of witness tampering, interfering. I mean, the judges were not very, very specific. They've said witness interfering. Witness interfering can be both for the defense and the prosecution. There were a number of allegations where the prosecution was accused and evidence provided, where witnesses were coached, where witnesses were paid for, where witnesses were trained, and some of them ended up even recanting, or in the open court and saying, we were paid this amount of dollars. So when people, you know, look at the witness interference, the witness intimidation, from only the defense side of it, then that's not correct.
Hassan Omar, who seated here, was at the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights.
Absolutely.
And since you have been very clear about that witness interference that the government alleges was done by human rights bodies here, do you believe he was one of them? behind the coaching?
Absolutely, I can tell you civil society groups and a number of human rights organizations, either through the Witness Protection Division or through other means. There were a number of witnesses who came on camera, who went to court, who recanted their testimony, who said we were promised better life in Europe.
But there's certain people you accuse of doing that. Is Hassan Omar one of them?
You know, what we are saying now, when we say in Afra Stadium, is that the ICC matter is behind us. And the Deputy President himself said, I have forgiven everybody. So we don't want to discuss the past. We want to discuss the future. And the future is to move Kenya forward in a more united, reconciled, and a cohesive society.
You stand in need of forgiveness, Hassan, for ills you committed at your tenure at KNC.
You know, one thing I am not is I never responded to this matter on a political platform because I knew this was a legal matter. Now that we are evolving, the OTP knows what I said about the witness coaching. William Ruto knows my position on the witness coaching because he's seen it. I recorded this matter judiciously. Karim Khan knows my position on the witness coaching. You know, I did not want to fight these things on a legal or on a political platform. I subjected myself to a formal legal process. So I said, bring it on, but within the forum of the court. So that's why and that's why nobody in the entire proceedings of those cases did my name or any of the names of Maina Kiai or any other implicated suppress. If anything, we saw a whole litany of other names that are currently serving in the Jubilee government and people who are confidantes in State House. So it is, you know, this was a matter that we did not want to fight from a political point of view, where there is one retraction after another, you know, battle or rebuttal. But the truth is, I put that matter very clear. And therefore, anybody who has been formally in the proceedings of the ICC, this is probably my first disclosure, they have seen my position in it. It is in black and white, and I also asked anybody who wanted to interrogate me in that forum. I was willing to participate.
That you did not coach witnesses. All right. I want to interrogate two matters, gentlemen, before we wind up. And one is, at both rallies, the need to commit to healing and reconciliation and dealing with victims was very evident. But specifically for government, what is your specific commitment, I beg your pardon, to the national cohesion agenda? We've heard the President say that it's time to honestly face what happened in 2007, 2008. How do you do that exactly?
I think the two rallies had different messages. I mean, they were live. Our rally was more on unity, or our rally was more on building cohesion. Our rally was more on reconciliation.
And
our rally was more on making sure and making a commitment that the remaining post-election violence victims, wherever they are, both as the government, as a coalition, we will do whatever it takes to resettle them, to rebuild them, and to bring them back to the level of the citizens. And that is the commitment we have made. In fact, if you look at the last 3 years, the kind of budgetary investment this government has made in making sure the victims are resettled, they are integrated into the wider society, is more than the Grand Coalition government.
Do you think that brings closure, just the resettlement of victims? Because you're talking about facing what happened in 2007, 2008 head on. What does that mean?
You know, what I'm saying is, you know, if you want to heal the nation, if you want people to forgive each other, if you want to build a more cohesive society, first and foremost, you must go and make sure you resettle the people who are affected. You compensate them. You pay reparations. That's what we have been doing. But more fundamental, I think, it's for us, the political class, to make sure that, again, we don't go back to that route. And how do you avoid that journey that took us to the ICC? Is to make sure that we play a politics which is based on ideas, is based on ideology, is based on issues, and not that which is based on ethnic polarization, on hate, on balkanizing the country. And I think that is where both sides of the divide, ultimately, we must head off. But of course, when when you look at the other rally in Kibera, I mean, my colleague Hassan was not there, but last night I had the opportunity to watch. I mean, it was more of, again, a lot of hate speech, a lot of violence, and I'm sure as we go to it, as we reform the electoral system, in which I tell people, before Parliament we have an election law, which if you look at it, it carries more of the reforms agenda within the IEBC. So I think all of us must make a commitment to a politics which is based on ideas, based on uniting the country, based on reconciliation, and based on building a more cohesive Kenya.
Hassan, is that enough?
First and foremost, the rally in Kibera, or Kibera for that matter, was trying to put into the narrative of the Kenyan public, and it did so effectively, the narrative of the victims. You know, for a long time the narrative has been those men and women with power who, in our view, have been able to subvert the process. So they were gathered in Afraha. And so therefore there was a need to start also locating the discourse for the victims. But over the weekend, to be honest with you, the person who made the most meaningful statement was Musalia Mudavadi. He talked about the TJRC report. There is a framework for reconciliation in this country. Si hiari tu munaitisha rally, sijui ule mwingine anasema hivi. There is a framework. We had a 4-point agenda. Agenda 1 was cessation of violence. Agenda 2 was CPEV. Agenda 3 was the elections. And Agenda 4 in constitutional and institutional reforms, or legal reforms. So Musalia Mudavadi said that there's no, before even Parliament today, the TJRC report has not been adopted. Implementation is not there. We are talking about a fund in terms of an indemnity fund. It has not been established. We are not seeing any particular movement. And then I think there's a narrow, Honorable Dwale, there's a narrow definition of victims, that it's only IDPs. Victims is a broader sense. Even the men and women who are 6 feet under, those are victims, and they cry out for justice from their graves. And the only justice to those who have killed others within our constitution is that it is punishable through a prosecutorial process. It's not about going to a rally or to a prayer for forgiveness. The forgiveness will come later from your Creator, but first we will punish you under our law.
If the government is serious about it implementing TJRC, you're saying?
I think government is serious. I mean, we have a 10 billion reparation compensation
but that's
money.
just one element.
And
I'm sure it's now Parliament. Me and him belong to Parliament to make sure that the report is stable, is discussed, and then government on its part, I'm sure, is forming the implementing committee.
And we will watch.
And TJRC is not only about the post-election violence.
Right.
It goes back to 1963.
But the institutions responsible for the implementation of the TJRC report. So moving forward, let us adopt it and let us implement it in the way it says.
We must wind up, gentlemen. But I thank you for your views. We've heard you. We're taking a break. We're back with more after this. Stay Sunday Live.